Fallout Equestria the Chrysalis, Chapter 14, Past and Future. Being an infiltrator, I was used to adapting to strange or unexpected circumstances. Improvisation is key when your job involves dozens of unpredictable factors. I always considered myself good at adapting, and it's one of the skills that saw me placed as an infiltrator. The Wasteland tested that adaptability. While it had challenged me in ways that I had never expected, and I had certainly stumbled in my attempts to handle that challenge, I had to press on. While I was certain that there were still many facets of this new world that I had yet to face, I was increasingly confident that I could eventually face them with the same confidence that I had faced in the challenge of infiltrating a largely alien society consumed with xenophobia and war. I was doing what changelings do best. I was adapting. In just a couple of weeks, the constantly overcast skies had become a simple fact of life. Seeing clear sky again was almost jarring, but in the most pleasant way imaginable. As we passed under the ragged edge of the clouds and into the warmth of the bare afternoon sunlight, our attention turned upwards. Dusty and Starlight were practically enraptured by the sight. They had seen the sky before, in tiny glimpses, but never such in a wide expanse. To them, the sun had always been held back behind the clouds, like a prisoner glimpsed past the bars of her cell. Seeing it free of constraint, beaming its warmth down upon us, it was an experience as new to them as the wasteland had been to me. Even Sickle cast the occasional glance upward, typically followed by pretending that she hadn't. As for myself, it was an instant dose of nostalgia. Despite all the problems I still faced, I couldn't help but smiling. The dark mood that had lingered over our group had faded as if it just was burned away by the light. Soon the sky turned to pink and amber as the sun descended into the horizon. We continued on even as the final light of day faded and the stars began to shine in the darkness. The night was every bit as beautiful as the day as we continued on. It was only just a couple more miles to our destination. With a lack of clouds, the night was reasonably bright, lit by the moon that already hung high in the sky above us. I found it quite fitting that Starlight found the night sky so fascinating. She tripped and stumbled many times, but it didn't keep her from gazing up at the stars. After about half an hour later, we came across a spur of railroad tracks that had split off from the main line and followed them up into a gentle slope leading to the CLT facility. The first thing to come into view was the building-sized piece of debris lying outside the fence, with its smooth white face and jagged metal back. It loomed in the darkness as we approached.
Whoa,
Starlight said as we approached, and she could finally make out the details.
Is that part of the tower that exploded? It is,
I replied, nodding.
It was still smoking when I got outside.
She whistled, peering closely at it as we walked by. As we made our way around it, the facility came into view. The ratty fence, the vacant guard shack, the collapsed wagon shelter, and finally, the bunker-like concrete entryway protruding from the side of the hill. The dim light made the whole place feel even more dead and vacant. Starlight paused beside the guard shack, reading the weather-worn sign.
Crystal Life Technologies, Experiment Site Alpha.
She cocked her head, frowning for a moment, and looked back to me.
What exactly is this place? I'm not sure precisely,
I said as we passed through the gate.
What I do know is that the CLT was a medical company focused on long-term health and longevity, that they were the primary developer of suspended animation technology, and that they tested some of the technology here. It's that technology that had caught my hive's interests. Is that how you,
Starlight looked around as if searching for the right words.
Got here? Well, it seems that way,
I said.
Some combination of that and hibernation chrysalis.
She immediately halted.
Wait, isn't that the queen you said that tried to take over Equestria? Oh, the word chrysalis basically just means cocoon,
I said, suppressing a sigh before continuing.
Although I suppose it's technically inaccurate if you want to get down to semantics, so I guess it's more of a tradition.
A moment's thought led to a frown.
I suppose that's probably because of her, too. Uh-huh.
I don't think she quite appreciated the cultural and etymological issues invoked by that word. We made our way through the vacant yard through the gaping maw of the facility entrance. Sickle parked the wagon and unhitched herself while Dusty eyed over the scene. Any dangers in there that we should know about?
There weren't any when I left.
I told him.
Unless something moved in during the last couple of weeks, it should be clear. There were no turrets or other defenses either.
A sudden thought occurred to me.
Do we have any rope? There's a collapsed stairway to get down to where I woke up, maybe 30 feet deep. I just flew up it, but that's not really an option for the rest of you.
Starlight gave me a sideways look, hesitating for a moment before coming back to the conversation.
Yeah, I've got some rope. I'm not sure if it's strong enough to support Sickle.
Sickle stepped up behind us.
You calling me fat, Runt? Yeah, Sickle.
Starlight said with a roll of her eyes.
Those were the exact words I used.
Sickle responded by lifting up a forehoof and lightly pushing Starlight, which sent the much smaller pony sprawling. While Starlight grumbled and picked herself up, Sickle just chuckled. Dusty cut off any further nonsense. It's getting late. Let's check this out and be done with it so we can get some rest. After everyone agreed, we set out. Dusty had me lead once more. The large hydraulic door, a foot thick, was retracted into the ceiling. It looked like it probably weighed several tons. I didn't even remember it from when I'd left the place just 2 weeks earlier, which I felt spoke much of my state of mind at the time. It made sense though. The place had been locked down for 200 years, so it seemed unsurprising that it should have a serious door to keep it sealed. Stepping into the lobby was both slightly familiar and incredibly alien at the same time. While the memories were fuzzy from their proximity to my long sleep, I could vaguely remember following these same steps into a well-lit lobby, one that had been clean and simple. The only signs of trouble of the world had been my hive soldiers, keeping guard over the entrance and without disguises. This time, it was nearly pitch black. Only a narrow cone of floor was dimly lit by the moonlight, which shone softly through the entryway. Starlight lifted up her pip-buck, turning on the screen's brightness, until the soft green glow faintly lit the far wall. It gave the space a cavernous and unwelcoming feeling, with the corners of the room fading away into the darkness. Dust coated the surface of the desk as we passed, and we cautiously walked deeper into the room. The only sound that could be heard was the dry echoing of our own hooves and the rattle of our equipment. The place was dark, silent, and dead. We slowly made our way back to the hallway at the lobby's rear and followed it. The lights that had once lit the place so well were now dark, and many of them hung askew or had fallen to the floor. Even the emergency lighting that had illuminated my escape had just gone out. In the glow of Starlight's pip-buck, only the nearest objects were well lit, cast into sharp contrast with the shadows and muted into a monotonous green. That light quickly faded, leaving us in a tiny island of visibility. Darkness filled the distance, marred only by the occasional glint of green light, reflecting off something glossy. Silence had taken over as we moved, a somber mood quickly settling in. For my companions, I expect it was the nerves of going into this strange place with unknown dangers. For me, it was just the knowledge of what had happened in the depths of this facility and what I was slowly drawing closer to. As such, I found it remarkably relieving when, as we passed a small lounge area, Starlight broke the mood.
Oh, hey!
She called out, pointing her pip-buck light towards the back corner of the area behind us. The hallway past us was plunged into darkness as the lounge lit up a little bit brighter.
Got a couple soda machines here. Think they're still full?
Dusty huffed out a faint chuckle that likely would have been inaudible if not for how quiet the place was.
I don't know,
I said, peering at them from the hall.
I didn't consider checking them.
We can do that on our way out, Dusty said. I don't want to get sidetracked until we've done what we came here for. So, we continued on. A few quiet drips pierced the silence as we walked past several broken pipes. Dusty and Starlight kept looking, alert for more trouble and opportunities, while I led them deeper. Dusty said nothing when we passed a cluster of pockmarks scarring the walls where bullets had struck them. They were the only signs of wear and tear that I remembered from before my sleep. If anything, they were less notable now. After 2 centuries, there was no more signs of the splashes of blood that had marred the scene. The ruined storeroom drew only a cursory glance, though the few rations that I hadn't carried with me on my first pass were quickly added to Starlight's bags. I picked up the pace, moving towards the stairway, and I was suddenly eager to get us all down as quickly as possible. Of course, Starlight's curious searching immediately turned up the reason for my eagerness.
Holy shit.
I froze, ears drooping and looking back over my shoulder. Starlight had stepped back from the doorway beside her, casting nervous glances between the room beyond and me. Dusty stepped up beside her, his expression tightening as he turned to me. What the hell happened here? I sagged, reluctantly turning around to walk back.
I'm not certain of the details,
I said, my voice quiet in the tomb-like atmosphere.
When I got here, the first time that is, the day the mega spells went off, there were signs of fighting. Bullet holes, a few spots of blood, that sort of thing. I wasn't told what happened, and I didn't ask. I just assumed that the ponies here weren't keen on letting a bunch of changelings use their facility.
I stepped up beside Dusty, looking through the doorway at the dimly lit heap of bones beyond. Dusty watched me for several long seconds before speaking. So, you killed them so you can take their place?
The world was ending.
I said, my voice sounding weak and tiny.
My queen wouldn't have made this move if there was any other way for us to survive.
Better some ponies die than some changelings, huh? I winced, looking away.
It's not like that. It wasn't about ponies or changelings. It was about trying to preserve something. Ponies had the stables, but these ponies, they were going to die either way, but we had a chance. I don't know how it all worked, but I know there was a reason we had to combine a changeling Chrysalis with her tech to survive for so long, and even then, most of us didn't even make it.
I could practically feel his gaze on the back of my head. The silence dragged on for a painful time, finally broken when I heard him exhale. Well, plenty of ponies would put their own kin before outsiders, he said. Still, I can't say that I like it.
I can't say that I do either,
I replied. We left the room behind, moving instead to the gaping chasm that had once been a stairway. With Starlight's pipbuck held over the abyss, the light shone onto the glassy smooth water below, pierced by several lumps of debris. The landing of the next lower floor was barely visible across the way.
Yeah, fuck that.
Sickle rumbled.
Yeah.
Starlight agreed.
That's a pretty good drop, and a sheer wall. If the rope can't hold you, I don't think you'd be getting out again.
You might have to wait here, Dusty said. The rest of us should make it just fine.
You fuckers need better ropes,
Sickle grumbled. Dusty shot her a glare. Or maybe you just need to bring your own supplies. As Starlight pulled out a rope, I called up my magic. The faintest tug was all it took to unwind my disguise, and in a flash, my fleshy pony form was stripped away to reveal glossy chitin and diaphanous wings.
Fucking
Starlight yelped as she jumped away and nearly collided with a wall. Dusty had his gun up, though the way it pointed between us, it seemed as if he was uncertain what he might need it for. Starlight spent a few moments with her eyes closed, taking deep breaths to calm herself down.
Holy... oh, hell,
she muttered, finally looking up to shoot me a glare.
It's easy to forget that you're some sort of weird bug pony thing until you do shit like that.
I hesitated before answering quietly.
I suppose I could take that as a compliment of my acting skills.
While it earned a single quiet snicker from Sickle, Starlight seemed entirely unamused at my attempt at diffusing the situation through humor.
Just give me some damn warning before you do that freaky bug magic, okay?
She angrily hauled over her rope, focusing onto the task at hoof, and ignoring me. She tied the rope around the largest and most stable-looking pipes running overhead, and tossed the other end out into the void. While she and Dusty climbed down one at a time, I pushed my cloak back to clear my wings, and just simply flew. The partially collapsed room beyond was as still and silent as the rest of the facility. The warbling speaker now lay silent, and the spinning orange emergency lights were still and dark. The light from Starlight's pipbuck bobbed and weaved behind me as she climbed down the rope, and even with the superior low-light vision of my natural eyes, it did little to pierce the gloom. Hooves splashed down into the water behind me, and a few moments later, Starlight stepped out beside me, lighting the room a little bit better.
So, this is all super creepy,
she muttered, probably more to herself than to me. I nodded.
It was not the most welcoming of places to have woken up in.
She glanced my way, silent for just a moment.
Even your voice sounds weird.
My ears drooped, though I didn't reply, and a minute later, Dusty joined us, followed by Sickles' voices echoing after us.
Don't you cunts take too long down there!
We continued on. We made our way to the far side of the room and proceeded down the long, straight hallway beyond, the metal grate floor rattling faintly with each step. We passed doorway after doorway, steadily drawing closer to our destination. Finally, there was only a single doorway left, and I came to a halt a few feet away. "What's wrong?" Dusty asked. I drew in a deep breath and slowly let it out, doing my best to ignore the suspicious tone of Dusty's question.
This place has some hard memories,
I said. I started to draw in breath to elaborate, but I stopped myself. I could delay things for quite a long time if allowed, and instead, I forced myself forward. I stepped into the room, the same room I had escaped not so long ago. For a moment, it was a dark void, with only a tiny patch of floor lit up by the doorway. Distant glints of light reflected on what little of the pitbuck's light pierced the darkness. 2 weeks deep in a stagnant air had done little to improve the atmosphere, and a faint but foul undercurrent of rot lingered in the background, along with a subtlest hint of ash. Then, Starlight followed around the corner of the doorway. The light spilled out, my own stark shadow sweeping across the room. I realized I had halted. I forced myself to continue to walk past the sodden lump of scattered ash, the murky puddles, and the remains of the first tattered and destroyed Chrysalis. I continued on until I stood before the fourth one from my left. Slowly, I raised the hoof to prod at the deflated remains. A bit of fluid sloshed, caught in the folds of the membrane, while the wires hanging from it swayed with emotion.
I was here,
I said. My voice, though quiet, filled the silent space.
I woke up in this Chrysalis 2 weeks ago. I had to tear my way free.
I took a step back, my hoof falls sharp and prominent as I looked around the room again.
That's when I found out I was alone. I was the only one who made it. My sisters, my queen, they were all dead.
My throat had tightened again, though I didn't feel the need to cry. I had done that enough already. It still hurt, probably always will, but I could accept it. I turned to the side, walking slowly over to where I had gathered them.
She was lying right here,
I said, dipping my muzzle. A few quiet hoof steps followed me, and Starlight stepped up beside me. Before us was an uneven lump of ash turned into a sodden mush by the slow but steady trickle of water leaking down the walls. In the quiet, I could hear the soft huff of Starlight's breath.
I barely made it.
I said, breaking the silence.
My body had atrophied from a lack of activity, and I was completely starved. I was on the verge of death myself, but...
I paused and then found myself smiling.
But she saved me.
I turned my head, opening the flap of my saddlebag as I continued.
Queen Ephema wasn't like most queens. Most of them saw the changelings in their hives as extensions of their will, as minions. She wasn't like that. Any changeling would gladly give their life for their queen or hive, but only the greatest of queens would give their own life for us.
Having retrieved my dented medical box, I set it onto the ground before me and opened the lid.
She must have woken up before the rest of us, but she was trapped inside. The facility was locked down and was supposed to remain that way until the computer thought it was safe outside. She had no way out. She could have woken us up. One of us probably had the electrical knowledge to force the door open. I might have been able to reprogram the computer to lift the lockdown, but the computer said it was unsafe outside. If she did that, she might be condemning us all to death. Or maybe she could have traded places with one of us. Any of us would have gladly given her our place if it meant that she would have a chance to live.
My horn lit up, adding to the green glow filling the room. I was distressingly low on magic at that point, but it felt like this gesture deserved the effort. A single love crystal floated up, wrapped in my magic.
Instead, she put her love into these and let us sleep. She gave up her life so that we might have a chance.
I looked back over my shoulder.
And then, most of us died anyway.
The smile was gone. The light of my magic winked out as I set the crystal down again.
Ephema,
Starlight said, staring off into space for a moment before looking to me.
you said that was your mother's name. It was. Oh.
She just left it at that. I was silent for a long time before I finally spoke again.
She should be here instead of me. I don't even know why I'm here. I'm not special.
At my side, Starlight recoiled faintly, some reflexive revulsion to what I'd just said. Her voice croaked for a moment as if uncertain that she should say anything, but she finally spoke.
Why would you say that? Because it's true. But you were
She searched for the word.
an infiltrator. That's something. 1 of 100. Or so.
I said.
Any of them could do what I do. Most of them could probably do it even better.
I gave a weak snort, finally looking at Starlight.
I'm not some super spy like you think. I wasn't infiltrating corrupt organizations or coordinating intel with the ministries or hunting out zebra spies. You know what I really did?
She blinked back at me as if uncertain how to reply, so I simply continued on.
I gathered love for the hive. Food. I was one step up from a farmer. The closest I got to espionage was when we discovered the smuggling going through Appaloosa. I got to keep eyes on some drug runners. That's it.
I turned, slowly looking around the room.
I don't even know why I'm here. I don't know why I was directed here. I don't know why I was given a chrysalis. There must have been a few dozen other changelings here, so why did I get one of those spots? Well, you made it.
Starlight said, though hesitantly.
By random chance.
I replied. I motioned a hoof to the back of the room.
From what I gathered from the terminal, I was woken up and released because the generators finally gave out and put the facility on backup power, triggering an emergency evacuation. If that hadn't happened, I'd still be asleep in that chrysalis. I probably have just died, just like all my sisters.
They both remained silent. Dusty hadn't said a single thing since we entered the room, eliciting to look around and just listen. Starlight kept her attention on me, and in the meager lighting, she looked concerned. I sighed.
Whatever the reason is, I'm here now. My queen was counting on us to carry on. She even gave her own life to ensure that. I might have not been special, but now, I'm the only one left here to carry that out.
I closed up my medical box again, sliding it back into my bag before turning back to them.
I know that this isn't the most ideal for time, but I'd like to ask you a favor.
Dusty frowned slightly. Depends on the favor.
What is it?
Starlight asked.
Help me find whatever is left of my hive.
I said, looking from one to the other.
There must have been other places like this, other plans to make sure some of us made it. Queen Ephema wasn't the type to rely on a single point of failure. She would have had other plans in place. Some others might have made it. They might even still be asleep waiting to be woken up. I owe it to my queen and hive to try and find them. I'd originally planned on nudging you into the direction that I needed to go, so I could do what investigating I could do on my own, but now you know what I am, so there's little reason for me to not ask you directly for your help.
They glanced at each other, but before they could decide, I added my own offer of assistance.
In exchange, I can offer my services in full for whatever task you might need of me. Since I no longer have to hide my true nature from you, we can take full advantage of my abilities.
Dusty was still frowning. You mean spying? Assassination?
If necessary,
I replied.
I know you want Big Gun brought to justice for what he's done. There were plenty of ponies like him during the war, pursuing profits and power at the expense of other ponies. They use deception and manipulation to get what they want, and that's exactly what you need to fight them.
His jaw had tightened. Just because something works doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. I frowned as well, my eyes wandering as I considered how to best reason with him. After a moment, my eyes settled onto his gun, and I looked back to his face.
Would you say it's wrong to kill ponies?
His head drew back just a hair, and he hesitated before replying. He could see where I was going with this. That depends.
Exactly,
I said, then dipped my muzzle, gesturing to his gun.
Lies are like guns, Dusty. I don't like using guns, but sometimes they're the right tool for the job, so I use them. Lies are another tool, and just like guns, they can be incredibly dangerous if used irresponsibly. Careless lies can get ponies killed just as easy as bullets, but well-placed lies can save lives. Do you have any idea how much espionage went into protecting Equestria? Because I do. I might have not been involved directly into the major operations, but I caught bits and pieces. The fact is, if we had more well-placed lies, the end of the world may never have happened.
I still don't like it, he said, and I nodded.
I doubt that you like killing ponies either.
He was silent for several seconds before replying. Depends on the pony. He shook his head and changed the topic. So, what happens if you find your hive?
I don't know.
I said, though I felt slightly uncomfortable with the answer.
That depends on them. What state they're in and how I can best help them. I might stay with them, or stay out here. Whatever helps the most.
He nodded, slowly and thoughtfully. And so what happens to us? He asked. You told us how important your secret was to you. What if they don't like the idea of some random outsiders knowing all about them?
You wouldn't be in danger, if that's what you're worried about. We don't turn on our allies, and I'll be there to speak for you. They might want to keep some things secret from you, but that's just how espionage goes. Besides, it wouldn't be the first time that we've worked with ponies who knew what we are.
Is that so? He asked, though he sounded a bit doubtful.
It is,
I said.
While we most operate in secret, there were times when it was beneficial to be more open about our assistance. I don't know all the details, compartmentalization of information and all that, but I do know that there were some high-up members of the Ministry of Awesome who were happy to make use of some changeling infiltrators against a mutual foe. I even heard rumors that the Ministry Mayor herself was involved. The Ministry of Awesome?
Starlight asked, an eyebrow raised skeptically.
They got shut down and turned into a storage lot for the other ministries. I mean, their buildings are great for scavenging if you can get past the insane security, but otherwise, officially, yes,
I said.
Many ponies eventually saw that it was a wasted effort, led by a showboating braggart who used the ministry to bolster her own image.
I gave a thin smile.
But that was one of those well-placed lies. In truth, Rainbow Dash ran Equestria's espionage and Black Ops.
And your hive just happened to be helping them, Dusty said.
We had mutual interests,
I replied, nodding.
Even speaking in purely practical terms, our hive was on the edge of equestrian territory, and we were much more invested in equestrian society than the zebras. We preferred that Equestria should win the war, or at least emerge no worse than it had entered, and after the war was over, we might even benefit from having highly placed ponies who knew our hive had come to their aid.
He looked away, thinking.
Practical reasons aside,
I continued,
we simply liked ponies more. I didn't like everything about your kind, especially not the rampant xenophobia that has grown over the decades of war, but we understand emotions quite well. Fear and anger were natural, given the situation. The zebras, though, they took it to new levels. There's a reason Equestria developed mega spells that healed and protected, while the zebras turned them into weapons that could kill by the millions.
Starlight had drawn a step back, her ears hanging low.
So, the zebras really were like all those posters say? thought those were all exaggerations.
Dusty snorted angrily. That's a load of crap. I shook my head.
No. Once you get past the lens of culture and experiences, zebras are just like ponies. Individually, they're quite nice. The problems lay in those cultural differences and how it subtly colored their view of the world. The short version is, zebras had gotten the idea that your Princess Luna had turned to evil again and had to be stopped at all costs.
Starlight slowly shook her head.
This is just so freaking weird.
I think we're getting off topic, Dusty said. But fine. Let's just say your hive was nice and friendly with ponies, helped out with the war, all that crap. That was 200 years ago. What happens if they're not like that now? My ears drooped. I'd done a good job of not consciously dwelling on that possibility, but it couldn't really be avoided forever. I drew in a deep breath and sighed out.
If they have changed so much that they would cast aside our ideals and turn on an ally like that, then they are no longer of my hive, and I would have no duty over to them.
Dusty cocked his head, eyeing me suspiciously. You'd seriously turn your back on your own kin for a few ponies you met a couple of weeks ago.
It's not about your kin,
I said. I'd unconsciously raised my head, adopting a stronger, prouder stance.
It's about what's right. It's about how my hive was founded. I wasn't alive for the sundering of the hive, but our people splintered into dozens of hives. Sisters turned into rivals, even fought each other for what they believed. Queen Ephema and my sisters faced many difficulties because of our own choices. And I am not going to dishonor their ideals simply because some distant relative has chosen to cast them aside.
Dusty continued to eye me, but his expression had softened. Finally, he relaxed, nodding. All right.
All right?
All right, he repeated. We'll help. Then he cast a glance Starlight's way. Or I will, at least. She nodded faintly.
Yeah.
But, Dusty said, holding up a hoof, you're gonna have to be patient. This doesn't mean we're gonna drop everything and go running off wherever you want. We got something important to deal with now.
It's been 2 centuries,
I said, forcing myself to shrug.
A few more weeks seems unlikely to make a difference. So, does this mean you'll have an idea of how to proceed?
I'll think of something. I raised an eyebrow, which earned a quick scowl. I will, he asserted. Look, if we're done here, let's head up and get some sleep. We can worry about plans later. I agreed, and we just turned away to return to the surface. Just outside the door, Starlight paused to look down the hall.
What's down that way? I don't know,
I said, looking at the heavy door, barely within the radius of her light.
The door wouldn't really open. Yeah?
She asked, taking a step that way.
You don't think there would be more of those chrysopods back there, do you?
I hesitated, but after a couple of seconds, I shook my head.
Unlikely. We passed several similar rooms on the way here, and none of them held changelings.
She continued to stare at the door.
You want to check?
I hesitated again, and even longer, and it was Dusty that spoke first. Do you think you can get that door open?
Hello? Salvage expert?
She cast a glance back at Dusty.
Yeah, I can get it open. Unless the door's tracks are all warped, then that might take us a while.